Alright, this LeetCode question is called same tree. It says given two binary trees, write a function to check if they are the same or not. Two binary trees are considered the same if they are structurally identical and the nodes have the same value. So in example 1, we have two binary trees that go 1, 2, 3. That would return true because they're the same. Then we have another one that's 1 with 2 on the left side versus 1 with 2 on the right side, and those are false. And finally we have two more. They go 1, 2, 1. The other one is 1, 1, 2, so that would return false. The way I'm going to solve this one is recursively.
Alright, one key thing to know before we start is that anytime you see in this diagram a circle with a number around it, that is a node with the value. So this is a node with the value of 10. If you see null, null is actually nothing, and nothing can't have a value. That's very important to know because that changes how we're going to check whether these nodes are equal. The first thing we have to do is to check if they're null, because if we try to first check the values on something that doesn't have a value because it's null, that would result in an error. So the order looks like this. Let's say we are here. We're going to check this node and the corresponding node in the other tree, and we see if they're null. If they're not null, now we can check the values. Are they the same? Yes, they are, so we can continue. If we look down here, the first thing we're going to check is its right side. We pass in both right sides, so now it looks like this again. We check, are we on at least one null? We're not, so now we can check the values. Are the values different? No, so we can keep going. We look down here again, and we again check the right sides. Is either right side null? Yes, it is. So now we check whether they're both null. They're both null, so we can keep going. We've already checked the right side, so now we check the left side. Is either of these null? Yes, it is. They both are. And since they're both equal, we can continue. At this point, we've checked the right side of both of these. Now we have to check the left sides. So we're back at the number 10 at the very top, and we're going to pass in the left sides of each of these. Is either of these null? No, it's not. So now we check the value. Are the values the same? Yes, they are. So we can continue. If we look down here, the first step is now to check their right sides. Is either of these null? Well, yes, it is. Are they both null? No, they're not. So they are not equal. And since they're not equal, we'll just return false, because that means the entire binary trees are now not equal. Alright, let's get the code for that, and remember we're going to do this recursively. What LeetCode has given us is a function named isSameTree, which accepts P and Q, and P and Q are just binary trees. So remember, the first thing we'll always do is we'll have to check whether the node we're on is null. So we'll say if P equals null, or Q is null. At that point, we'll just return whether or not P is the same as Q. If they are both null, that means we can keep continuing through the binary tree. If one is null and the other is not, that would return false because that means the binary tree is not equal. All right, remember the next thing we have to do is, since we've already made sure that they're not null, we can check their values. We'll say if the values aren't the same, so if p.val doesn't equal q.val, then we'll just return false. However, if we've passed these two steps, now we can keep going. But the way to keep going in this example is to use recursion. So we'll say return is same tree, and we'll pass in both right sides, and is same tree, we'll pass in both left sides. For this to overall return true, both halves of these would have to be true. So let's say is same tree p.right q.right is true, but is same tree p.left q.left is false. You're going to have one true and one false. When you put those together, that's still false. All right, so let's just step through this very quickly. We'll be here. It's going to check if either of those is null. They're not, so now we're going to check their values. Are the values different? They're not different, so we can keep going. We'll go into the recursive calls. It says return is same tree p.right q.right. So now what's going to be passed in is these two. At this point, we'll end up back on line 14. Is either of these null? No, they're not. Are the values the same? Yes, they are. So we can keep checking more. We'll go into the recursive calls again. It's going to pass in the right side of both. In the diagrams to the left, I denoted nulls as underscores just to save space. So what's going to be passed in is p.right, which is null, and q.right, which is also null. So when we get to line 14, we're going to check whether they're null, and yes, they are. They're both null, so we can keep going. Since we've gotten to the end of that branch, it's going to jump back out, and now it's going to check the left sides. That'll be here. We'll be on line 14. Is either of these null? Yes, they are. Are they both null? Yes, they are. So we can keep going. At this point, we've checked the right half of both of these. So now it jumps back up a level again. And now it passes in the left side. Is either of these null? No, it's not. Is the value for both of these the same? Yes, they are, so we can keep going. So now what it's going to pass in on line 22 again is the right side. Now, is either of these null? Well, if we look at the left side, that's the node with a value of 6. That's not null. But if we look at the right side, yes, that is a null. So since on one side we have an actual node, and on the other side we have null, these are not the same, which makes the entire thing not the same. So that will return false. All right, so let's run the code. Looks good. Let's submit. All right, so as you can see, our solution was faster than about 91% of other JavaScript submissions. As usual, the code and written explanation are linked down below. If you liked the video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps out a lot. See you next time.